This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, folks. This is the More Money Show all over these great United States of America. Thanks so much for joining. Hope you're enjoying the NCAA basketball tournament and maybe some warmer weather as the temperatures finally start to rise a little bit. It's been another cold week all over the East Coast, but warmth is coming as we get deeper into spring. It's actually, the sun is out where I am in Washington, D.C., in the middle of the swamp. So anyway, I hope you're having a great weekend and lot to talk about. I wish I were in a better mood, but look, this was a brutal week, folks. This was a brutal week for the economy, brutal week for inflation. And there's no way to sugarcoat this. These were really terrible numbers. We have got to get oil prices back down. They rose over $100 a barrel. At some points they reached $110 a barrel. That's double what the price of oil was back at the start of the year. And so I worry a lot about this because it will mean that inflation is going to spike up to 4 to 5% in the next couple of months, just at the very time we were starting to get inflation down. And so it is incumbent to get this situation in Iran resolved quickly, expeditiously, and victoriously. And I think that's what every American wants. I think that's what Trump wants. We don't want to have this be, many, many months, or it could get very ugly politically. And so that's my take. I know, by the way, I'm not a foreign policy guy. I'm not a military guy. I'm an economist. I'm just telling you that at the very time we were making America more affordable, now we've got this situation with oil prices rising pretty dramatically. So in some states, gasoline is well over $4, and some well over $5. And if you live in California or really high cost states, you might be paying $6 a gallon for gas. That's not a pretty sight. And so I will be taking your calls, by the way, in the show. So I want to hear what you have to say about it. But look, it's pretty clear that we need to do everything we can to produce as much oil and gas and coal and nuclear power and hydropower, everything that we've got to bring prices down, because energy is the ultimate resource. It is the most important resource of all, because everything else we have, whether it's our food, our healthcare, our technology products, our manufactured products, our homes, all depend on energy. And by the way, that's only going to get more expensive, or at least the demand is going to dramatically increase as we move forward with the artificial intelligence and the robotics and the data centers. So we've got to be better prepared for this. We've got to build more out the grid system. We've got to produce every single barrel of oil here at home as we can. I don't understand why many of you listening to this show are in New York or in the New York area. Why in the world is New York not drilling? There's a lot of oil in upstate New York. Pennsylvania drills for it. Why not New York? What about California? There's no place on the planet that has more oil than maybe other than Saudi Arabia and Texas that has more oil than California offshore, but they won't allow it to happen. And then they complain about $6 and $7 a barrel gas. So let's produce it here at home so we never have to really worry about the Middle East anymore. Let's not be dependent on the Middle East any longer for our energy. That is my take on that situation. I do think that we're going to start to see the oil price migrate down as we do get the Straits of Hormuz open. And in fact, if you look at what's called the futures price of oil, which is what the markets expect the oil to be at in 6 months from now, it's supposed to go right back to the $55 to $60 a barrel that we were at before the Iran situation started. So I think it is short-term pain, and hopefully it will bring long-term gain for the country, but it's too early to tell. A lot of other things I want to bring up throughout the next couple of hours. One of them is the this story about another story about New York City. And it rains bad news, doesn't it, in New York City these days? But the latest is something we had on our hotline the other day, a story that originally appeared in the New York Post, which is that in New York City, which is already pretty bankrupt, right, and has huge deficits, is spending, are you ready for this? Are you sitting down, folks? $81,705 a year for every homeless person. Now, listen, I do believe we want shelters. We need programs to make sure that every American has a roof over their head. We don't want people sleeping outside. We want to take care of people who are down on their luck or people who have mental illnesses and so on. Drug addicts, we want to make sure that they have shelters. But come on, $81,705. Folks, you could practically put somebody up at the Ritz for a year for less than $81,705. Where is all that money going? By the way, this is a great example, if I may, about why private sector programs are so much more effective than government-run programs. So when it comes to something like shelter and providing homeless services for those who are out of their luck, maybe lost a job or have a drug habit, or for one reason or another, mental illness is really associated with homelessness. We want to take care of those people. We're a rich country. We can do that. But the government's spending $81,000 a year. The Salvation Army and other groups that run private shelters spend less than half of that amount, much less than half of that. And the other thing is that they try to change the behavior of the people who are in the homeless shelters. They make them work for their shelter. Yeah, you have to wash the dishes. You have to clean up after yourself. You have to, shovel the snow or take out the garbage, things like that. At these government shelters, they just give them the money and that's it. They give them the money and it doesn't change their life whatsoever. In other words, what's the old saying? Teach a man or give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he will, eat for a lifetime. We're not doing that in the homeless shelters, but $81,000, folks. That's pretty outrageous. And then they wonder why New York City has a big, deficit. A couple other quick stories before we get to my first guest. That's going to be Wendell Cox, who's one of the top demographers in the country. He's going to tell us where people are moving to and from. But how about, again, this is a New York City story, and I know a lot of you are around the country, but I know a lot of you are at the flagship station WABC. Mamdani wants to install a 15 mile per hour speed limit for any road that is within, I think it's a mile of a school. I forget. But as it turns out, there's hundreds of schools in Manhattan, and that would mean that virtually all roads would be 15 miles per hour. I mean, come on. It's already takes 45 minutes to go across town. Now you're going to put a 15 mile per hour speed limit there. I don't think that sounds like a very good idea. One last thing before we take our first break, I am going to nod my head and salute. Oftentimes I make fun of government employees because I just don't like government bureaucrats, and they're very officious, and they get paid 35-40% more than private sector workers. And we have way too many of them. We don't need 2.5 million federal employees. But I have to salute the workers at the TSA lines who are at the airports, who are working without a paycheck. Now, I know a lot of them have not shown up, and shame on them. And that's causing lines, sometimes 1 or 2 or 3 hours to get through the airport security lines. But I've been traveling a lot the last couple of weeks, and I'm just so impressed with the conscientiousness, and sense of duty of these TSA officers who have showed up for work. And so in some of the airports I've been to, it's not an hour long. It's only about a 20-minute wait, especially if you have TSA pre-check. And it's because these people showed up. And so thank you. I'm saluting them. But we should also at the same time privatize these. And so if we had private security at airports as we used to have, and before we put them in the federal unions, we never had these problems. So let's privatize the TSA. But in the meantime, slip the guy a $5 or something like that. I did that yesterday at the TSA line. I said, thank you so much for what you're doing. And it's a fantastic thing that people really care about the country and they're showing up even though they're not getting a paycheck. They will get paid eventually, but it's a real hardship for them. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. This is the More Money Show, and when we get back, we're going to talk about where are Americans moving to and where are moving from, and how much money are they taking out of the blue states and sending into the red states. We'll be right back in just about 2 minutes. This is the More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend in the middle of March, as spring is now upon us, it appears. Although, my gosh, I hope we still don't have any more snow and cold weather. It's been a brutal winter. And as George Harrison would say, here comes the sun. It feels like years since it's been here. Okay. So this is a big story. I teased it a little bit in my last segment, but where are Americans moving? Where are they going? And where are they leaving? This is the biggest story of America. It is transforming this country. I've talked about this week after week after week on the show for the last 5 years that I've been doing the show, the More Money Show. And by the way, I hope you all are getting our Unleash Prosperity hotline, which is absolutely free. It costs you nothing. Just go to unleashprosperitynow.com and just tap on the button for hotline, and we will send it to you for free, and you'll learn a lot from it. I think you'll enjoy it. We have over 100,000 subscribers already. But one of the items that we had this week was on this story that the new numbers are out from the IRS about where people are, not just where people are moving to and from, but how much money they are taking with them. What's their income? And is it poor people? Is it middle class people? Is it rich people are leaving these states, and where they're going and where are they taking their money? And so to analyze this data, my good friend and colleague, Wendell Cox, who is one of the top demographers in the country, he works with me at Unleash Prosperity, has come on the show. So first of all, Wendell, thanks so much for coming on this weekend.
A pleasure to be with you.
Okay, a lot to cover, Wendell. You've gone through the numbers. I've gone through the numbers. Let's present them to our listening audience. So I'm looking at the states, the top 5 states that gained money from other states. Florida was number 1, a net $21 billion. Texas was number 2 with $9 billion. South Carolina and North Carolina combined had $8 billion. And then Arizona came in 5th with $3 billion, along with Tennessee, which was 6th with $3 billion. These are big numbers, and these are net numbers. Every one of these states has either no income tax or low income taxes.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And the one thing that a lot of people don't consider is that, for example, Florida, with its $21 billion gain in terms of personal income from people moving in, that $21 billion is going to be there every year.
Yes.
And that's a big deal.
That's unbelievable. You're right. And in fact, this is just for 1 year. And so over 10 years, as you know, Wendell, your analysis finds that Florida has brought in, if you take the number over a 10-year period, and the cumulative amount of the money that was transferred out of other states was over $1 trillion for Florida.
Boy, it's just amazing. It really is amazing. But what it says, and people don't, a lot of the professionals do not understand this. When you allow the cost of living to get so high, as in these no income, as in the states with big income taxes, no one can move there. They can't afford to. I mean, you can't turn your state around if it's too expensive to live there. Middle class people aren't going to move there.
Well, it's so interesting that it looks to me, as I look at this list that you helped put together in analyzing that new IRS data, that, let's see, I'm just going through it. Florida, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Arizona, Tennessee, Nevada, Idaho, New Hampshire, Georgia. Well, 8 of those 10 are red states, and you could say 2 of the states are, let's say, purple states, maybe 3. Arizona is kind of purple. They have a Democratic governor, but and Nevada is kind of purple, although they have a Republican legislature, and New Hampshire is kind of purple as well. So it's all red states or purple states that are seeing people enter into.
That's right. Yeah. And like New Hampshire, for example, in doing the research, I was really impressed that they've basically gotten rid of all their wage income tax. So if you live in New Hampshire, you're not paying a tax on your wages. It's not quite the same as some of the other states, but they've made some great progress there,
So this is something that's been going on for a long time. The numbers seem to be a little bit lower this year than in the past years. And I think that I'm just hypothesizing here, Wendell. Tell me if you think I'm right, that the numbers are not as big as they were in 2020, 21, and 22, in part because of the COVID really caused a huge outmigration from blue states because the blue states foolishly locked down their economies.
No question about it. I think that your analysis is right on. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think one of the lessons here is don't shut down your economy ever again, because you will see your wealth move out. When we come back with Wendell, because we got to take a quick break, Wendell, when we come back, I want to talk about the states where people are leaving. And this will be of special interest to our listeners in the Northeast, because that region is being bled to death in terms of interstate migration. New York and New Jersey are near top of the list. They're not number one, though. When we get back after the break, Wendell Cox will tell you the number one big loser, the source.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm your host, Stephen Moore, economist, and I hope you're getting our Unleash Prosperity hotline that we come out with every morning, because you can be the smartest person in the room. If you read it each morning, it takes you about 5 minutes. And we're talking about the new report that just came out a couple of days ago from the IRS that looks at how much money, when people leave one state to another, how much money they take with them. And my friend and colleague Wendell Cox is on the line with me, because he is one of the top demographers. He's done the analysis before anyone else on what these numbers are telling us. If you're just joining, we relayed the information that Florida, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Arizona were the big winners. And that, in other words, they imported between those 5 of them, somewhere about $40 billion on net from other states. That's a big, big stack of cash that came into their state in just 1 year, by the way. If you look at over 10 years, the number is roughly 10 times that high. So now we want to get to the loser states. And Wendell, as I look at these numbers, New York, as you know, was second worst. Will you tell our audience, please, Wendell Cox, what was the big loser state in 2023?
Oh, it was California.
Yep, California. And so California lost 24. Let me make sure I get this right. No, last year they lost $12 billion. New York State lost $10 billion. By the way, this is the net number. In other words, it's the amount of money that came into this. That left the state minus the number of the amount of money that came into the state from movers. California was number one, the big loser. Then New York, then Illinois, then Massachusetts, and New Jersey. By the way, Wendell, those are the 5 most liberal states. They have the highest taxes. They have the most regulation. They have the heaviest Democratic sponsored legislatures. And those are the states that people are leaving. What does that tell us?
Yeah, it tells us that nobody's paying attention. I hear recently that Governor Hochul in New York has started to talk a little bit about this subject. I hope she really begins to understand it, because it's a terrible shame what's happened to New York in terms of the people that have left. I mean, 4 million people net have left the state of New York since the year 2000. 4 million. That's as many people as live in the city of Los Angeles.
Incredible. I mean, it's just sad, really, because California and New York are critical states to the economic health of our country, and they're just being bled to death by these red states like Florida and Texas. By the way, going back to those states that gained, Florida was the number one, Texas was number two gainer. But what's really interesting is that Tennessee, and let me just get this whole list on here. Tennessee, Nevada, and New Hampshire are in the top 10. 5 of the states with no income tax had the most amount of money coming into their state. Wendell, what do you say about that?
Well, that's exactly what one would expect if you understand anything about economics. And
well, you know, what's really frustrating to me is that much of our audience listening to this show is in either the Chicago area or in the New York area, and all they want to do is raise taxes on the rich. And it just doesn't work, Wendell. I mean, every time they do this, the rich leave, including we're starting to see the rich leave Washington State and California at even faster pace because of their proposed new tax increases.
Yeah, and believe it or not, the Bears may move to Indiana.
That would be so humiliating. As you know, I'm a Bears fan. If they move to Indiana, the Indiana Bears, I don't know, that doesn't sound so good. But look, this is because these states have become unlivable. I mean, Massachusetts raised their income tax. New York has raised their income tax. New Jersey has raised their income tax. Why don't they get this? I mean, you know, these are the same people, Wendell, who lecture people like you and me. Oh, you don't follow the science. You don't follow the science. Well, the science says that people are leaving states that raise taxes, and yet in Washington state, they just went from being the lowest income tax state in the country overnight to becoming the 5th highest tax state in the country. I mean, how do you even explain that?
Well, and what's happened in the state of Washington is they've been raising taxes all along. You had that capital gains tax increase or establishment a few years ago.
Yes.
And, you know, it's only going to get worse. And by the way, in recent years, since the pandemic, Washington, along with cohorts, Oregon and Colorado, have basically seen net domestic migration stop. So these states that were attracting a lot of Californians, mainly to move there, they're not attracting them anymore. Now they're going to Idaho and Utah. Yeah.
And now, of course, the concern is that some of those red states, like the people in Idaho and the Dakotas, and you mentioned Utah, they're worried that those Democratic voters are going to come in and change the state. But it looks like the people who are leaving are now the Republicans, not the Democrats.
Yeah, it's become a little clearer that this is the impact, which it wasn't that clear 10 or 15 years ago to people not so inclined.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing story. Thank you, Wendell, for your great work in assembling all this data so we would have it ready for the show. We're going to have a full report on this at our website, Unleash Prosperity. And also, you can go to our website if you have not already done it, called votewithyourfeet. Is it votewithyourfeet.net? Yeah, votewithyourfeet.net. And it has, you can look at every state, what's happening, where are people moving to and from, how much money you can save to move from one state to another. So you should look that up, folks. That was Wendell Cox, one of the top demographers in the country with Unleash Prosperity. And when we come back, we'll be on with Jay Jackson, who's been a regular. He is back by popular demand. So hang with us.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm economist Steve Moore. We've been talking a lot about what's going on with the economy, what's going on with gas prices. I want to turn a little bit to finance in a minute with my good friend Jay Jackson of Abacus Financial Management. But before we do, I love it. I always get texts from our readers. And you may recall last week I went on a riff about how the Democrats do not want to pass a law that would require voter ID when you vote. And these are the same people, by the way, the same people who are against that are the people who say, oh, Trump is trying to destroy democracy and destroy our voting integrity. When, of course, I think almost everyone listening to this show agrees that it is just a good practice to try to deter the illegal voting by requiring people to have a voter ID. I mean, you need voter ID for about 40 other things in America. Why not voting? And so this friend of mine who's a listener of the show just texted me with a little note, and it says, if the Democrats really thought Trump cheated to win the election, Democrats would be pushing for tighter election standards right now. So why aren't they? And I think that's a good question. Look, we need to pass the SAFE Act. I want to make sure that everybody votes. If you have a legal vote, you should vote. But we should also make sure that when people try to vote illegally, they're essentially disenfranchising you. They're canceling out your vote. So let's make sure that we have more voter participation, but the people who are participating are actually legal residents of this United States, citizens of the United States, and that they have registered to vote. Okay, so on to Jay Jackson. Jay, first of all, thanks so much for joining.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be back.
So let's start with the markets, Jay. You're in the financial business. I listen to your advice a lot. I think a lot of our listeners are freaking out a little bit about the big sell-off we've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks. But you're more in this for the long term in terms of abacus. So what is your overall perspective on things, and what is your advice to investors?
I think right now, and whenever we look at things short term versus long term, I think let's add a new perspective here in what really matters. Yes, you can have short term volatility. Yes, seek assets that tend to be less correlated to the rest of the markets. But in addition to that, if you're over the age of 65, you have a greater than 50% probability to living to 90. So that's 25 years in retirement. You're going to have
okay, so hold on. Time out. Hold on. Say that statistic again, Jay, because that's a very important one, and you're the expert on longevities. Tell us that statistic again.
It's super important. So if you're at age 65 now, you have a 50% or better probability of living to age 90. And what that just means is hold on. I just turned 66 just last month. Okay, Jay. So you're saying I have a 50% chance to live to 90? You do. And Steve, you're fit. You work out, you do those extra things, you might even live a hair longer, right? But it depends on some of your family genetics and how well you take care of yourself. But that's why it's a 50-50, right? And you used to plan in retirement for 15 years, 12 to 15 years. And now, Steve, I'd be telling you to plan for 25, right? Nearly a 2X. And I'm saying to you, when you look at some of this short-term volatility, I know that can cause some duress, but my gosh, you got to be looking out much further than that. And if that's true, then these are going to be some of the smaller blips and things when it's all said and done. Like, my point is, you can cause as much mental duress and stress on yourself, which can shorten your longevity and have a bigger health impact than worrying about, rising cost of inflation in a very short window, because we know that will cycle out.
Okay. And so given those numbers that you're telling us, because by the way, as you know, Jay, our audience tends to be older. Most of our audience is in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. So this applies to them. So we're looking at the market. We're seeing, big sell-offs, and that is certainly tied to the rise in the oil price. But what does that mean, when you're advising your investors? When you see a sell-off like this that is sparked by, in this case, the situation in Iran and the high oil prices, does that's freaking, people are feeling like jumping off the ledge right now, and I want to walk them down from the ledge.
Yeah. Sure. I do too. And I think, one, obviously keep your long-term approach, and that's easier said than done. But two, look at assets that perform well in these markets. Right. We acquire and purchase life insurance policies. That is an uncorrelated asset. It's not like a piece of private credit that's a lending vehicle. This is backed by a large insurance company. So those kinds of assets are interesting. I think that when you start looking at your own portfolio, quick example. We had somebody who was, in her late 80s, had used most of her savings because her husband had passed for medical bills and all these things, and she was going to have to move out of her community. She had $1 million life insurance policy, Steve, didn't realize that policy was worth almost $500,000. That's personal property. And because of some of this volatility, she's now thinking to herself, hey, how can I use my assets in a smarter way? And your life insurance policy is personal property for you to use today. You don't have to wait for to actually pass away to do that. Words, it has a net present value.
So you're saying that you can cash out on your policy.
You can, and that's what Abacus helps with people. We paid out over $250 million last year for people over the age of 65 who were seeking liquidity. And so think about that, right? If you're in a volatile time period and you're having some nervousness about the market, look across the board of all of your capital resources and think to yourself, okay, I didn't realize my life insurance had a significant amount of value. Maybe I should look into that, create some additional wealth for myself, and then extend your financial planning, right? And then look at correlated assets. We're one of the largest asset managers in this space. We manage over $3.5 billion. And institutions come to us during these volatile times to invest in these kinds of contracts because they're not correlated. They have long extension and they have a great credit behind them. So, when you're in these types of volatile markets, I think it's important to look at assets that tend to perform well in these types of uncertain markets.
And in terms of the service that you provide at Abacus, so let's again take someone like myself. I just turned 66. I've had life insurance, since I was 30 years old, since I started having children, because it was really to protect against an early death, and I didn't want to leave my wife and my 2 kids destitute. But now I don't really need life insurance, right? I mean, it's all my money. I mean, it's my money. I'm not taking care of my kids any longer. Right. So if let's say I go to Abacus, I come to your shop, and how does it work? How does this service that you provide work? What are you going to advise someone like me to do?
It's very easy to do. One, we have a calculator. They can, all of your listeners can get almost an immediate response as what their policy might be worth. But 2, once we determine that there's value here, we get a HIPAA release from you and we get your updated medical files, and then we re-underwrite for you. But there's something really beneficial here.
Are you going to give me like a medical exam or something?
No. We just look back in history at your medical history, which, by the way, everyone should do and have. We give you back those medical files. We go through our expense. We look at them. Number 1 cause of death in emergency rooms is misdiagnosis because people don't carry their medical files. I give you that medical file so that you have these things. It is incredibly valuable. Then from there, we underwrite you, give you a summary, and establish what your upcoming lifespan looks like based upon the current trajectory you're on, your life arc, if you will. And then we decide, hey, because of that, this is what your insurance policy might be worth in today's value.
And so, again, this is fascinating. So I want to obviously leave money to my children. Right. And so I have a trust, but then also with my life insurance policy, if I die, that money could go to them. But on the other hand, I want to leave a good life in my last remaining years of life. So what do you advise someone like me to do in that situation?
So what you could do is what one of our clients just recently did, where 25% of she had $1 million policy. She kept $250,000 for her heirs and her family. And then she took the current net present value of about another $250,000. So she got $250,000 in cash, $250,000 remained in the name of her heirs, and then sold the rest. So there's a lot of financial options here, but the first step is just understanding how much longer you're going to be in the contract, right? We need to place a stronger value on our health span and our lifespan.
And Abacus where are you located?
We're located in Orlando, Florida, but we're nationwide. We service everyone all over the country. Over $200 million that we paid out to people all over the United States.
$200 million.
We're highly regulated. Yeah, almost 250 actually. And it's great because we get to touch so many different lives and different stages of where they are. And we're a firm believer that, everyone's on their own life arc. Your lifespan isn't a straight line, and particularly nor are your finances. And we can help you understand both more clearly so you can make smart decisions so you're not so stressed out today. I know a lot of people, our clients, aren't stressed in this market fluctuation, right? Because they have a better understanding of what it means.
So, so what you're saying is like, someone like me, I'm 66. Maybe I'm going to retire in a few years. I don't think, hopefully not. I want to keep working, but let's say I'm going to retire in 2 years. Yeah. Then I want to live a nice retirement, and you're saying, hey, you've got money. You could cash in on some of that insurance and, go on cruises and things like that and live a comfortable retirement life.
Right. Or meet other expenses or stay in the community you want to remain in. Or my gosh, you could gift that to your grandkids and see their faces and pay for college. Like there's thousands of things you can do because it creates liquidity that you didn't know you have. Right. And so you can go to abacusgm.com is the best way, and you can kind of pick your journey and we're here to help. And
finally, because people love it when you come on, Jay, that's why I always bring you on. In our last 90 seconds, you always give us 2 or 3 pieces of advice for old folks. So I'm not old, but I'm getting there about how I can provide more longevity to my life.
Sure. And in the past, we've spoken about learning a second language. Today, I'm going to talk about something about grip strength. Grip strength is one of the most important things that you can capitalize on. And it's really easy to do, and it's free, right? You can grab a pull-up bar, you can grab anything, and you can literally just kind of start to hang a little bit. Stretch yourself out, but grab onto that bar and see how long you can hang on that bar. It doesn't require a lot of strength. It doesn't require a lot of you don't need a special gym. You just got a bar that you're going to hang from. Because if you do that, you improve your grip strength and reduce your probability of falling. Because literally when someone has a severe fall over the age of 65, your lifespan drops to 2 years. So if you have proper grip strength, right, you can help prevent that fall from occurring. There's other balance things you can do, but I tell everyone, focus on your grip strength. Whatever you can do.
I like
if you're
that
on a walk, hold weights, right? Or you can just dangle from a bar. Everybody can do it. And I can tell you, it'll have a huge impact on your lifespan and longevity.
All right. Jay, great advice as always. Thanks for coming on. We always like to hear your advice about how we can live longer and healthier and wealthier. Folks, this is the More Money Show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, folks. We are back on the second hour of the More Money Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Look, I do care a lot about money. That's why I do this show every Saturday afternoon. We are on from 1 to 3 p.m. on this great and important and influential station, WABC, and I know we have affiliates throughout the country and we have people listening online. So thank you so much for tuning in. We have a great audience. We have great ratings thanks to people like you. And it's not just that there are a lot of you listening. It's that we have such a smart audience. I will, as always, preserve the last 15 minutes of the show to take your calls on our, what we call our More Money hotline. That number, 1-800-858. Let me make sure I've got this right. 1-800-848-858. 1-800-848-9222, I believe it is. What? 848. Yeah, sorry, I had one digit wrong. So make sure you got this right, folks. 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848-WABC. And what I want to hear your opinion on is some of the new things that are coming in New York, around New York City that I find crazy. One of them is this idea that you're only going to be able to drive 15 miles an hour within something like a half a mile of a school. And that, look, we all want our school children to be safe, but Manhattan is closed in. It's a very obviously population concentrated area. And if you have that speed limit, it means you're not going to be able to drive more than 15 miles per hour virtually anywhere in the city. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Maybe within a few blocks, but not that long a distance, should you have a 15 mile per hour speed limit. And the other outrage that I mentioned at the top of this first hour of the show, $81,705 is what the city is spending on homeless shelters per person, $81,705 a year. You could put somebody up at the fanciest hotel in all of New York City probably would cost less than $81,705. So where is the money going? It's just another indicator of how completely inefficient and corrupt the city is, that's money down the drain. And look, we need homeless shelters, no question about it. I want people who have a mental illness or a drug problem or have lost a job. We don't want people to go without a roof over their head. But come on, $82,000. It's clear a lot of that money isn't going to help the people who are homeless. So the topic of the day, and I talked a lot about this in the first hour, but I can't get it out of my head, is what is going on with the Northeast. The Northeast is being bled to death. People are leaving those states at record levels. And what we found out last week from a new report that came out on Friday is they're taking lots of money with them. And they're leaving and they're going to Florida, they're going to Texas, they're going to Utah, they're going to Idaho, they're going to the Carolinas, and Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey were three of the biggest. Now, wait, to be precise, New York was the second biggest loser. New Jersey was the fourth biggest loser, and Connecticut was the 11th biggest loser of money. And by the way, Connecticut and New Jersey used to be two of the richest states in the country, Connecticut and New Jersey. And then they both did something really, really stupid 40 or so years ago. They adopted an income tax in their state, and they keep ratcheting it up and up and up and up and up and higher and higher and higher and higher. And so I think both of those states started with like 2, 3, 4% income tax. Then it was 6, then it was 8, then it was 9, 10, et cetera, going up and up and up. And those cities are just being, pilloried by other states that have no income tax at all. So what am I driving at? Here is my idea, folks. Write it down, send it to your mayor, send it to your governor. How about if Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York, and don't laugh at me for saying this, what about if Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey eliminated their income tax? I mean, come on. I mean, Zach, you're from New Jersey, right?
Yes, I am.
Why can't we eliminate the state income tax there?
Because they spend too much money.
Yeah, Zach, who's my producer, is from New Jersey. He says they're spending too much money. But my point would be, and he's of course correct, that you spend way too much money in New Jersey. But if you got rid of your income tax, that would force them to lower their spending, and you could have just maybe a slight increase in your sales tax to pay for it, and you could get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. So it's not hard to figure out, how do we get Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey to be rich again? How can we get back the exalted status that they once had? How can the entire Northeast could be a region that would be dominant again? But guess what? Then I've made this point many times on the show, but I keep saying it to you because I hope that you'll do something about this. The Northeast is no longer the dominant region of the country. It was for the first 200 years of our country, but now the dominant region is the South. It's Florida, it's Texas, it's Tennessee, it's the Carolinas, it's Georgia, it's Alabama. Even Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, states that we used to laugh at. Even those states are growing relative to the Northeast. And why is that? Is bad leadership. And when Kathy Hochul says that it's their patriotic duty for all these millionaires and billionaires to move out of West Palm Beach and Austin, Texas, and come back to New York. Be a patriotic millionaire, she said. Be a patriotic millionaire and come back and pay your fair share of taxes in New York. And people say, hell no, I'm not going to do that. And by the way, if you want to be patriotic, Kathy Hochul, I've got an idea. Cut your income tax. Don't raise it. Cut. They will come back. If you cut it, they will come. If you cut the income tax, they will come back, but they're not going to come back to pay a 14% income tax when they can pay 0. Folks, I live in Maryland. I'm kind of a hypocrite, okay? I live in a high tax state. It wasn't as high a tax state when I moved in as it is today, but they keep raising our taxes year after year after year, and I'm pretty fed up, and I'm ready to move across the river back into Virginia, where I came from. But Maryland's a beautiful state, but the taxes are destroying the state. And so I'm not making this up, folks. I just ran the numbers, and I'm not rich. I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing fine financially, but I'm not a multimillionaire by any means. But I would save so much money off of my taxes by moving to Florida, I could buy $1 million house in Florida, and just the money I would save on my taxes would pay for the mortgage. So that's why people are leaving these high tax states. I don't understand why this is so complicated to people like Kathy Hochul, but maybe it's time for a new governor. Maybe it's the time for a new governor in New Jersey. Maybe it's the time for a new governor in Connecticut. I know there are good candidates running. There's one candidate we're not allowed to endorse candidates on the show. We won't. So I'm just going to say there is a candidate who's running for governor in Connecticut who wants to eliminate the state income tax. Great idea. Let's have the revival. Okay, when we get back, folks, my good friend E.J. Antoni will be coming on. EJ is the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. He's going to tell us what's going on with this economy. When do we get out of this rut that we're in? Because I pray we do it very soon. This is the More Money Show, and we will be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So we are back, folks. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about finance. We're talking about politics. We are on this show every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m. And we have affiliates throughout the country. But, of course, our flagship, the mothership, is WABC. And John Catsimatidis is the one who has given me the privilege to sit in front of this microphone. By the way, it's an amazing thing. We get 5 hours of live programming on WABC on Saturdays, which is unheard of in the radio world. Maybe there's someone else that does this, but I guarantee you most of the shows, if you were to flip your dial and do not do it, are going to be, either canned shows or paid commercials and so on. No, we give you live programming, 5 hours, 3 hours Larry Kudlow, 2 hours Steve Moore. It's a privilege for me to follow the great Larry Kudlow, by the way, who was my best man at my wedding. So he's my best friend. So we've been friends for 40 years. Okay. Speaking of friends, I shamelessly brought another one of my friends on the show because Larry always has me on his show. And that is E.J. Antoni. He's one of the top economists in the country. He's the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. He works with me on projects at Unleash Prosperity. E.J., thanks for joining.
Oh, Steve, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I got so much to talk to you about, EJ. And look, I'm going to just be honest. I'm not in a good mood. I'm not in a good mood about what's going on with this economy. I mean, it's painstaking to watch this market fall nearly every day. Now, for the last 3 weeks, we've seen a big sell-off. We're seeing oil back above $100 a barrel. I don't know what's going on. I'm not an expert on the Middle East. I don't know how much longer this is going to take. Now Trump wants $200 billion more for this at a time we're already running a $2 trillion deficit. I mean, when you and I were talking, I had you on about a month ago, and we were talking about how bright the future looked. And, we all hope this is just a short bump in the road, that we end this conflict in the Middle East quickly and victoriously. But what is your overall takeaway from the economy as we stand right now?
Well, Steve, I agree 100%. We were going into this really so incredibly bullish on 2026. But now what's going to happen with oil and natural gas is such a massive wild card. I just don't think there's any way to say for sure anymore. And look, all of these different talking heads out there who are trying to tell folks, I know oil's going to 200, or I know oil's going back down to 70. Please, I beg of you, don't listen to those folks, because the truth of the matter is they don't know. Nobody knows. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 hours in the region, let alone 6 days or 6 weeks. And that's really what. By
the way, AJ, if you and I did know the answer to that question of what the gas price or the oil price is going to be a month or 2 months or 4 months from now, we'd be rich sitting in Tahiti.
That's exactly right. We'd be drinking margaritas and coconut milk or whatever the case may be. And again, the reality is the situation on the ground is incredibly volatile. And so we don't know what's going to happen in terms of military situation and the political situation. And that's why we don't know what's going to happen with energy prices. But the reality of the situation, I think, Steve, is this. If the president essentially wraps everything up within the next few days and brings everybody home, gets our military assets out of the region, and Iran reopens the Strait of Hormuz, if there's not much more damage done to energy infrastructure, then prices, I think, will come back down relatively quickly and pretty close to where they were before the conflict. Not quite as close.
I agree. And by the way, EJ, I mean, if you look, the safest bet you can make is to just look at what the futures price is. That's what the market believes the price will be in 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months. And those charts do show you that, they expect in a month for the price to start coming down and actually falling in 6 or 7 months to where they were before this all began. Now, again, those forecasts could be wrong, but that's the best indicator we have.
Right. Exactly. That's kind of the collective wisdom of the market, what you're describing, Steve. I think you're absolutely right. So clearly the market is not pricing in something like a multi-year war, but at the same time, if we go back to just a week ago, the market was also not pricing in Israel striking some natural gas fields in Iran, and then Iran striking natural gas fields in the region in retaliation. And that's why then natural gas prices went up. And so this is why we say we just don't know for sure what's going to happen in the conflict and which direction prices are ultimately going to go. Qatar, for example, announced several days ago that because of damage done in those strikes by Iran, I think it'll take between 3 and 5 years for some of their gas fields to get back up to the production that they were at.
Yeah, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. So, exactly. I mean, the irony, of course, is that the world really is awash in oil and gas, or at least it was as of 2 months ago. And so, it really is. I mean, it just seems to me that it's a short-term issue, but look, I'm a little older than you are. I've lived through these, since the 70s. I remember the Iran hostage crisis, and I know a lot of our listeners, remember that. And I remember packing my, family when I was a teenager in the 70s, and my parents would pack us in the old station wagon, and we would sit in line for 10 cars in front of us in the Chicago area to get gas in our car. So my point is, we've lived through this. And by the way, the gas price tripled over the 1970s because of the flare-ups in the Middle East. It seems to me, if you look over the last 50 years, every time we have a flare-up, and you've seen these charts, EJ, every time there's a disruption in the supply from the Middle East, for example, after 9/11 or with the wars going on there all the time, every time it happens, the price goes way up.
Exactly, Steve. And now, can you imagine, look, Trump deserves a lot of credit with the whole drill baby drill agenda, because we do have a lot of production today, and that's helping minimize the impact here at home. But Steve, can you imagine if we didn't have 4 years of Biden and left-wing governors throttling energy exploration and production? We would have so much excess capacity, whereas right now we don't have a lot of excess capacity. We have a lot of production, but we're basically producing near capacity. If we didn't have the anti-energy policies of the left for 4 years, we would have so much more capacity that when a crisis like today comes around, the U.S. could simply turn around and start exporting energy like crazy and making tons of money on it. But again, unfortunately, because of the mess that Biden left us, which Trump has been reversing, but we're still dealing with some of the effects of Biden policies. Because of all that, we just can't even export, even if we wanted to. We can't export enough to meet the demand from places like Europe or Japan. Japan gets 95% of its oil from the Middle East.
So can you explain, EJ? I get asked this question all the time, and I try to explain it, and I've tried to do that with my listeners, but some are still unconvinced. So the question I get asked all the time is, okay, so we have a lot of oil that we're producing here in the United States. In fact, under Trump in his first year, his first year of his second term, the United States became a net exporter of oil and gas. In other words, we were producing more than we were consuming. And then people don't understand. They keep saying, well, are the oil companies just gouging us because they still have the supply here? So why is our gas price going up at the pump here when it hasn't affected our supply here? Can you explain what's going on it's a global commodity, right?
Well, exactly. Japan, we just mentioned that they get 95% of their oil from the Middle East. Well, now that spigot has been turned off, what is Japan doing? They're knocking on the door of West Texas and saying, we'd like to buy some oil, please.
Right, exactly.
And so now there's this huge increase in demand for American exported oil. But the other thing that's important to remember, Steve, is that a lot of the oil we get out of the ground, we don't even actually keep it here at home. We send it abroad to refineries that are optimized for that type of oil, what is usually called light sweet crude. A lot of the refineries that we have here in the United States are actually not, they were not optimized. They have not been efficiently set up to handle that oil. Instead, they've been set up to handle oil like what comes out of Venezuela, which is a lot heavier crude, and also from the Middle East, again, typically heavier crudes. And so often a country may have one type of oil, but it actually refines and uses a different type. It really underscores, I think, your point that this is a truly global commodity. And yes, it's true. One refinery, even if it's optimized for a certain type of oil, can handle almost anything else. But then you typically have to add a lot of other products to try to essentially treat the oil to make it easier to refine at that particular location. In other words, it can get really expensive to try to handle other types of oil that you're not optimally set up to handle.
Well, that's a really good point. And, we do have more oil and gas and coal than any other country in the world. We should be using that to the fullest extent possible for both our economic and national security and our safety, so we don't have to be dependent on these countries that are so unreliable in the Middle East. And so we have clean coal. We can use nuclear power. We can use everything. In some cases, we can reuse green energy. We can use solar and wind. Maybe we can get 10 or 15%. But the idea, EJ, that we were going to move to net zero fossil fuels was one of the most dangerous, idiotic concepts I could possibly imagine. And that's what Joe Biden was trying to force on us when he was president.
Exactly, Steve. And look, we don't have to imagine, what would happen to the United States right now if we had actually kept going. In other words, if we had been at this net zero thing longer, if we had further reduced our reliance on coal, on oil, on natural gas. We don't have to ask what if, because we can actually just look right now, Steve, as you know, at Europe. And we can see those nations like Germany that have been going down this road a lot longer than we have. What's going on there? They're actually, the German government is having to tell their citizens, please stop driving. Please don't turn the lights on unless you have to. Please limit how much you're going to work. If you're a factory, please limit how much machinery you're using. They're begging anybody and everybody to limit their energy usage because they're running out of it. And now they are so desperate for energy that they're having to go knock on the door of the Kremlin and ask Vladimir Putin to please give them more. I mean, this is such a disaster for them. By the way,
the thing your description of what's going on in Germany is absolutely correct. And again, I'm a little older than you and a lot of our listeners, but what you just described is exactly what Jimmy Carter did in his infamous Malaise speech when he said the solution to the energy crisis is in the dead of winter, he told everybody to turn down their thermostats. I mean, it was just so stupid. And yet that was what Germany tried to do as well, and it didn't work so well. We got 3 minutes left. I want to ask you about, I'm a little nervous about $200 billion more for the Defense Department. We already have over $1 trillion military. At least can we get that paid for? Do we have to borrow $200 billion more?
Oh, Steve, I'm sorry. This just feels like maybe betrayal is too strong of a word, but, this administration was making such great progress on cutting government spending. You've highlighted over and over again that we got rid of 10% of the federal workforce in just a year. Yeah. I mean, what great progress. You had DOGE going through and all these government agencies and departments and cutting so much waste and abuse and fraud and corruption. And it just feels like we're throwing all that away now by blowing $200 billion here. I mean, for context, this is more than all the money that we've given to Ukraine over the last, 4 years? So this really is huge. You're going to expand the deficit by almost 10%.
And look, I know that our listeners have very different opinions about this, but my point would be if the Pentagon really needs $200 billion more, I don't have the knowledge to know whether that's true or not, but let's assume that's correct. Then why can't we take $200 billion out of these other government programs to pay for it?
Steve, I support that 100%. Absolutely. I think that idea of yours is great. We look, at the end of the day, we just don't have the money to spend. And again, this is something that we've been saying for years about the Ukraine. When all of these different politicians, especially on the left, but also on the right, wanted to give the Ukraine all this money. And we kept saying, look, we don't have the money to give. We're literally having to borrow the money to give it to somebody else. Why doesn't somebody else just borrow it then, right? And so once again, it doesn't matter if it's the Ukraine or if it's Israel or if it's anybody else. We just don't have the money to spend.
Well, I think that it's a great summary. That's E.J. Antoni, by the way, folks. He is the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation, works with me at Unleash Prosperity. You see him on Fox News and Fox Business News all of the time. E.J., I still remain optimistic about the second half of the year. In our last 30 seconds, what do you think?
Yeah, Steve, again, if we can get this conflict wrapped up and we can get energy prices stabilized again, we can do that relatively quickly, then there is a lot going for us in the second half of this year, especially with the big, beautiful bill, different provisions of that kicking in, the CapEx boom. So there's still a chance.
Yeah, amen to that. Great note to close on. That's E.J. Antoni from the Heritage Foundation, folks. We'll be right back, and later in the show, we will be taking your calls. And please, if you're a new caller into the show, please tell our operator, because we will put you at the front of the line. We want to hear from the ladies. We want to hear the young people. We want to hear from everybody around the country. I want your thoughts about all of this stuff that's going on. As you can tell, I'm a little befuddled myself. I'm praying that this turns out well. I'm pretty confident it will, because I have a great confidence in this president, in Donald J. Trump. The number is 1-800-848-9222. We'll be taking your calls when we get back. This is WABC.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm economist Steve Moore. You can catch me, by the way. I'm on Monday mornings on Fox Business News with Stu Varney. I'll be on tomorrow. Not tomorrow. On Monday morning, 9:15, if you care to watch. And we've been having fun over the last couple hours talking about what is going on with the economy. We're trying to sort everything out. How confident are you that we're going to come out of this conflict okay economically as we face these higher and higher prices for gasoline? But before I go to your calls, and we have, it looks like we have one line open, I want to hear from you about all the stuff we've been talking about over the last hour on the show. I mentioned this briefly at the end of the last show, but I want to bring it up again. I wrote this column called Death of a Doomsday Salesman. And that doomsday salesman was Paul Ehrlich. And Paul Ehrlich was famous for writing a book in the 1960s. He wrote that book in 1968 called The Population Bomb. The Population Bomb became a massive bestseller in the United States and around the world. It sold millions and millions of copies. It became a pop cultural thing about how the world is overpopulated, that human beings were propagating like field mice, and we were going to be standing, shoulder to shoulder on the planet. And we're going to run out of room. We were going to run out of food. We were going to run out of farmland. We were going to run out of energy. We were going to run out of everything, and we were all going to die of starvation, because it was going to be like a Malthusian future where the population would outgrow the supply of food, and there'd be mass famines, and that the life expectancy would be cut dramatically. It would fall to 49 years of life on this earth. By the way, he was completely wrong. Right now, the life expectancy in the United States is closer to 79, not 49. Anyway, this so-called scholar Paul Ehrlich, who won a Genius Award from the MacArthur Foundation for his book. He also appeared on the Johnny Carson show all the time, and he became one of the most celebrated authors and quote scientists of modern times. And he was wrong about every single prediction he made. Every prediction he made, he was wrong. No, we're not running out of farmland. No, we're not running out of food. No, we're not running out of energy. It may seem like we are right now because of what's going on in the Middle East, but we have plenty of energy. It's just that the supply is being restrained because of politics. And so, yet this man is still celebrated. And it's amazing to me. I was looking at the obituary that the New York Times ran on Paul Ehrlich because I was wondering whether they would admit that the guy that, and by the way, what was really sinister is that because people believed what Paul Ehrlich was saying, the subtitle of his book was Why We Need Population Control. And what he meant by that was dictatorial, almost Stalinistic, population control programs, including forced abortion, forced sterilization, infanticide, anything to get rid of kids because we had too many kids on the planet, which is ironic because today, if anything, the child birth rates have fallen so dramatically. I mean, the birth rate of children is falling so dramatically that we now have actually an inverse pyramid. In other words, we have a lot of old people and not enough young people, just the opposite of what Paul Ehrlich thought. So there's a warning there, folks. When you hear people say, trust the science, follow the science. Well, wait a minute. This was supposed to be, settled science that the world was overpopulated, and it was completely wrong. It was settled science that we're all going to starve to death. That was wrong. It was settled science that we're running out of energy. That was wrong. It was settled science that pollution was going to get worse. That was wrong. The air and the water in our cities is cleaner today than it's been in 100 years. So look out for these kind of sinister pop, so-called scientists who try to tell you this is the way the world is when they don't know up from down. And that was clearly the case with Paul Ehrlich. So let us take one or two calls before we have to take our next break. Mr. Producer, who is first in line?
We have Lisa from Montana.
Lisa calling all the way in from Montana. That's fantastic.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Thank you for calling. I'm doing great. What's on your mind?
Well, I think before any state should be allowed to even think about raising income taxes, there should be an audit on that state. Look how much money was found just in Minneapolis.
Yes, it's great. I mean, I love it. Hard stop right there. Before, if any kind of private business said, we were running out of money, we're going to need to borrow even more money, the shareholders would say, well, wait a minute. Well, let's look at your expenditures. But we almost never do that in government.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're so spot on correct. And by the way, when Elon Musk came to Washington with Doge to try to find more efficiency in government, he was treated like a villain. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I think there's people from both sides that are involved. That's why he was treated like a villain. But I don't care what state, red or blue, if there is waste, fraud, and abuse, cut it out because we're just dooming ourselves for failure.
Well, I'll give you an example of what you're talking. By the way, you're precisely right, and I'm so glad you called. It's a wonderful call. Thank you very much. I'm going to just give you one example for New Yorkers, because I know a lot of you listening to the show are in New York City or surrounding area. So it used to be that New York had a bigger population than Florida, but Florida is growing like crazy, and New York is losing people. And so right now, Florida actually has a larger population by a couple of million more people than Florida. But let's say for the sake of argument, and just round the numbers, that they're both roughly equal population. Florida's a little larger, but not significantly larger. If you look at the budgets of these two states, I've made this point before, but I think it's such an astounding statistic, I have to repeat it. So if you compare Florida and New York's spending is twice as large on their government as what Florida spends. Twice as large. And they have the same number of people. So their per capita spending in New York is twice as high than Florida. Now, then think about the government services in Florida and New York. I have lived in New York. I used to work for the Wall Street Journal, and I spent a lot of time in Florida. We're actually looking for a second home maybe in Florida, like a million other people. I guarantee you Florida's public services are superior to New York's. The schools are better. The sanitation is better. The police service is better. The fire service is better. The streets are cleaner. I could go on and on and on. The police, and I'm not demeaning anybody, but, you have less crime in Florida than you do in New York. I could go on and on and on and on. So where is all that money going, New York? Come on. You're spending twice as much as New York, Florida does. You have worse services. So stop telling me, Zoran Mandami, that you can't find anything to cut in your budget. It's just a lie. It's a lie. You're not looking. It's right under your feet where the waste is in that city government. And it's Moore's law is every city and every state in America could cut their budget in half and still have very good public services. Okay, we're going to be right back with our final segment. We got 5 people waiting on the line, so we'll take your calls as they come in. We have one open line. It's the More Money Show on WABC.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Folks, this is the final segment of the More Money Show. Hope you're having a great weekend. And by the way, I'll be picking up your calls in just a minute. I just wanted to mention one other quick thing about Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York. She is saying it's your patriotic duty to pay more taxes in New York. She's not trying to win people back to New York by saying, hey, we're going to cut your taxes. She's saying, no, it's your patriotic duty to do so. I don't know. When you're paying twice as much taxes in New York as your other states, and she says it's patriotic to do that, I'm not buying it, Kathy. I think New York needs a new governor. Okay, let us get back to the lines because we do have one line open, but I'm so pleased that we've got a stack of people waiting to talk. So I'm going to try to be brief with everyone so we can get as many comments in because we got a lot of smart people on the line. Next up is Jake.
Yes, sir. Hi there. Love the show. New caller.
Thank you. Hey, Jake, where are you? What town are you in?
I'm in Maryland. I'm in the swamp.
Where?
Like you are. Yeah. Montgomery County.
What town? Because I'm in Maryland as well. What town do you live in?
Just outside of North Potomac.
Okay, you and I are probably pretty close because I live in Potomac as well. So you're right down the street. So by the way, Jake, I live in Maryland. You may have heard me say this earlier. I would save so much money if by moving to Florida, it would pay my mortgage. That's how bad taxes are in Maryland.
You're preaching to the choir, but if you only have $1 million to go buy something in Florida, you're not going to get much.
You're not going to get much. No, I've discovered that. You're correct, my friend.
There looking, but here's why I called. It seems like Trump authorized, he lifted sanctions on Iranian oil, and he authorized the release of Iranian oil on, I guess, ships already at sea. And I guess that's in an attempt to lower gas prices. But apparently Iran's going to receive about $14 billion for this oil, and it just seems like we're funding the beast. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, my gosh. I have not heard that. By the way, I'm not an expert on the Middle East and what's going on there. But if I'm going to check it out, Jake, and if you are right, that is funding the beast. We don't want to be buying oil from the people who are essentially at war with. And so that would be a big blunder. Now, the big issue, of course, is how do we get that oil from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other countries that are there in the Middle East back here where it can be used and get to Japan and get to all the regions of the country that are consuming it. And my belief is that, until we get the straits open, we're going to be still looking at, $4 and $5 a gallon gasoline at the pump. And that's a lot because if that's the case, then as I said earlier on the show, we're looking at 4 or 5% inflation and that's not going to go over too well. But I'm going to check that out, Jake. It's a great question about are we buying Iranian oil? Because I hope we're not. I don't want to give money to the people who hate us. Let's move on to Wally.
Hi, Steve. You're doing a great show.
Thanks for calling.
Hi. Oh, thank you. Okay, we had the Berlin airlift back in 1948. Let's do the Hormuz oil lift today. We lease and insure 100 oil tankers in the Persian Gulf currently and losing money. We man them with crews from the U.S. Navy, bring them through the straits out to the middle of our fleet in the Arabian Sea, where they're completely protected, transfer the oil to commercial oil tankers, and the price of oil drops and our stock market goes to the roof. We cut off Russia. It's a military oil ferry.
Wow. That sounds like a pretty good idea to me. I think in the short term, that could get that oil out of that region, put it on the global market, bring the price down. We got to act quickly, folks. This is really important. As long as the price of oil is above $100 a barrel, we're very much in jeopardy of a recession. I mean, the economy cannot function well with $100 a barrel oil. So anything that brings it down. By the way, I'm very much in favor of taking some oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I talked about this last week. The problem is we can't do it because it was drained by a certain president who preceded Donald Trump. And I'm talking about Joe Biden, not Barack Obama. And he took out the oil just because he didn't like high oil prices because he wasn't drilling for it here at home. And so now it's of limited usefulness to us, because of what Joe Biden did. But we should also get rid of all these additives that we're putting in when they drill the oil, they take it to the refiner. The refineries have to add all sorts of like ethanol and other biofuels and stuff into this. And it's supposed to be good for the environment, but it adds about 25 cents to 30 cents a gallon. So why don't we do this? Why don't we suspend those refining requirements now? It's a bit of a scam anyway. And then when the crisis is over, we can bring them back. Those kinds of things would bring down the gas price temporarily by about 50 cents a gallon. Okay, let us move on. Do we have Gene from Brooklyn?
We have Richie in the Bronx.
Okay, Richie, you're on.
Good afternoon, Steve. You mentioned using wind and solar energy earlier. It's absolutely ludicrous to use either of those sources. Neither of them is viable. The first reason is that neither of them is available 24 for more than a couple days in a row.
That's true. That is true. By the way, I am not a fan of, and by the way, the subsidies that have moved into wind and solar have been absolutely astoundingly enormous. $400 billion under Biden went into all these alternative green energy sources, most of it into solar and wind. And in fact, it ruined the industry. What I'm saying, I want to be clear on this, so I'm glad you called in, Richie, is that let's get the government out of the way. Let's let the market decide what kind of energy we use, whether it's coal, whether it's oil, gas, nuclear power, hydropower. We get a lot of our power from hydropower. By the way, people in New York get a lot of electricity from Niagara Falls. So that's a good form of electricity production. All I'm saying is that in some places, solar power can make a lot of sense. If you live in Phoenix, Arizona, where the sun is always shining, or Palm Springs, California, you should probably use solar power because there aren't a lot of clouds and you're getting a lot of heat and sunshine from the sun. And in certain places, like in the plains of Texas, you can get wind power, but it's not scalable. You're not going to be able to run our country, our whole country, our manufacturing, our schools, our hospitals, our cars, our technology sector, our energy, our data centers. You can't run those on windmills. You can't run those on solar power. So I believe we could get 10 to 15% of our power from green energy, but let's get rid of the subsidies. And you're right, sir. They're not scalable to provide the kind of energy needs that we have. Look, it's very simple. Over the next 15 years, we are going to see a tripling of our energy demands in the United States because of robotics, because of data centers, because of AI. Now, people say, well, I don't want AI anyway. I don't want data centers. Well, look, Folks, if you don't have data centers, you don't have a cell phone, right? You don't have your computer coverage. So of course we want to have plentiful supply. Of course we're going to need data centers so that our cell phones work and all of our other forms of communication. We cannot do without it. And so those demands are going to be extraordinary. And they're going to grow and grow and grow, but they're going to make life on Earth much better for us. I predict in 15 years, everybody's going to have their own robot, and the robot will make coffee for you. It'll make your bed for you. It'll drive you to work. I don't know if it'll do your homework, but these robots are getting better all the time in terms of the quality of the services they can provide. And just like factories use robots, we will have robots ourselves to use. I've seen them, by the way. I've seen them in offices already. They are coming, and they're not, in my opinion, they're nothing to be afraid of, but I know people are kind of fearful of that. I think we have time for one. I don't know if there are any more callers, Mr. Producer. That 800 number is 1-800-848-9222. Do we have any further callers?
Yes, we have Michael in Rockaway Beach.
Michael, you are our final caller of the day.
Do I win the prize then? Thank you, Steve, for taking my call. I have an answer for that one caller called in about that oil that's being sold, the Iranian oil that's in the ships.
Please inform us.
Bessent was on an interview the other day, Treasury Secretary, and those funds are all going to be frozen. Those billions of dollars are not going to Iran. They know exactly where these accounts are globally, and they're freezing all of those funds.
Okay. Well, I've got it. Thank you very much. Hey, we're going to take one more quick break. I'll be back in 2 minutes. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are toward the end of the hour, so thank you so much for joining. My person of the week is Elon Musk. We talked about him earlier. I don't know if you've heard the news, but he is going to personally, this is such a great story. You may have already heard it. He's going to personally pay for the wages and salaries of those wonderful TSA, airport employees who do the security. They haven't been paid for weeks and weeks because of this crazy Chuck Schumer lockdown. Congratulations to a real patriot, Elon Musk, for saying, I'm going to pay their salaries. They're keeping our airports running. Boy, I am so impressed with this guy, Elon Musk. He has blood that is red, white, and blue. Folks, we will be back. Same bat time, same bat channel on the More Money Show. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and please tune in next week.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?